Have you ever noticed that the moment you finally lie down, your mind gets louder, the room is still, the lights are low, the phone is face down beside you, and yet your thoughts begin to pace. They walk through tomorrow's meetings, they replay the conversation from earlier, they calculate what you forgot to say, they rehearse what might go wrong, they question what you should have done differently. You're not anxious in the daylight, you managed everything. You stayed composed, but now, in the quiet, something inside you refuses to settle. You're not broken, you're human. And tonight, you're going to understand why this happens, and what Marcus Aurelius knew about the mind at night that most people never discover. There's a reason your thoughts return when nothing is happening. Picture this. A man sits alone in a military tent. Outside, the sounds of an empire at war. Inside, a single lamp. He writes in a journal he never intends to publish. He is the most powerful person in the known world. Emperor of Rome, commander of armies, architect of law. And yet, in his private writings, he confesses the same thing you feel. The mind races. The worries multiply. The body is tired, but the thoughts won't rest. He doesn't write about conquests. He writes about how to quiet the noise inside. His name is Marcus Aurelius, and the book he left behind. Meditations is not a philosophy of victory. It's a philosophy of sleep. Not the sleep of exhaustion, the sleep of a tranquil mind. You see, Marcus understood something most people miss. Overthinking at night is not a flaw in your design. It's a signal your mind is trying to protect you. It's scanning for threats. It's rehearsing outcomes. It's searching for control in a world that feels unpredictable. But here's the problem. The mind can't tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. So it treats your unfinished email the same way it treats danger. It treats tomorrow's uncertainty the same way it treats an approaching storm. And the more you try to think your way out of it, the louder it becomes. Marcus knew this 2,000 years ago, and he developed a practice, a set of reflections that didn't eliminate worry. They transformed it. They taught the mind to rest without escape, to be present without resistance, to release what cannot be controlled without feeling powerless. This is not a sleep meditation. This is a philosophy that changes how you hold your thoughts. Because once you understand what your mind is doing at night, you stop fighting it. You guide it, and that is when peace arrives. So let your shoulders drop. Notice the weight of your body where it rests. And for the next hour and a half, we're going to walk through the nighttime teachings of a Roman emperor who learned to sleep with a tranquil mind in the middle of chaos. Not by denying his thoughts, by understanding them. And there's a hidden bargain your mind makes at night that Marcus saw clearly. We'll name it in just a moment. Chapter 2. Why the mind races. Your mind doesn't race because you're weak. It races because you care. Let's start there. Because most people misunderstand what's happening when thoughts multiply in the dark. They think it's anxiety. They think it's a disorder. They think something is broken. But Marcus would ask you a different question. What is your mind trying to accomplish? Because the Stoics believed that nothing in nature is random. Every impulse has a purpose, even the ones that feel destructive. So when your mind replays the conversation from earlier, it's not punishing you. It's trying to learn. When your mind calculates tomorrow's outcomes, it's not tormenting you. It's trying to prepare. When your mind scans for mistakes, it's not sabotaging you. It's trying to protect. The problem is not that your mind does this. The problem is that it doesn't know when to stop. And this is where the pattern reveals itself. Imagine someone preparing for a journey. They pack their bag, they check the map, they calculate the distance, but then they check again and again and again, not because new information has arrived, but because certainty feels safer than trust. This is what your mind does at night. It rehearses, it calculates, it plans, not because the task requires more thought, but because thinking feels like doing, and doing feels like control. Marcus writes in Meditations, confine yourself to the present, not because the future doesn't matter, but because the future cannot be controlled by worry, only by action. And action requires rest. Here's the small detail that changes it. Your mind races at night because daytime taught it to stay busy. You trained it to solve, to optimize, to produce. And now, when you lie down, it doesn't know how to stop producing. So it produces worry. It produces scenarios. It produces imaginary conversations that will never happen. The mind is doing what you taught it to do. It's working, but nighttime is not the time for work. Nighttime is the time for release. And this is what Marcus practiced every single evening. Not shutting down the mind, redirecting it. A modern example. You finish a long day, you accomplished everything on your list, you should feel proud. But as you close your eyes, your mind says, what about tomorrow? And suddenly, you're planning again. Marcus would recognize this immediately. He would say, you're confusing preparation with rumination. Preparation has a clear end. You gather what you need, you make a decision, you rest. Rumination has no end. It circles, it repeats, it searches for certainty that doesn't exist. And the more you ruminate, the more tired you become. But not the kind of tired that leads to sleep. The kind of tired that leads to more thinking. There are two kinds of tiredness. The first is physical. Your body is spent. Your muscles are heavy. You lie down and sleep arrives. The second is mental. Your body is still, but your mind is running. You lie down and the thoughts multiply. This is the tiredness Marcus understood, and he knew that you can't force the second kind to stop. You can only guide it somewhere quieter, because the mind doesn't need to be defeated. It needs to be understood. And once you understand why it races, you can teach it to rest, not by shutting it down, by giving it permission to stop rehearsing. Notice the air moving in and out. Let the next breath be slightly slower, and with that in mind, we can move forward. Because if the mind races to create control, then the path to calm is not more thinking. It's releasing the need for control altogether. And that is where the Stoics began. Chapter 3, Night as Moral Mirror. There's a reason certain thoughts return at night. Not because you're broken, because something in you is still trying to be understood. Marcus believed that nighttime reveals what daytime conceals. During the day, you stay busy. You manage tasks. You perform your role. But at night, when the distractions fade, the truth rises. And sometimes, the truth is uncomfortable. You see the decision you avoided. You feel the resentment you buried. You notice the gap between who you are and who you want to be. This is not punishment. This is the mind's way of asking, what needs attention? The Stoics called this moral reflection, not in the sense of judgment, in the sense of clarity, because the mind doesn't want to torment you. It wants to align you, and nighttime is when that alignment becomes visible. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine someone who spends their day being agreeable. They say yes when they mean no. They smile through frustration. They avoid conflict. During the day, this works. It keeps the peace. It avoids confrontation. But at night, when they lie down, the mind starts replaying the moments they stayed silent. And suddenly, they're rewriting the dialogue. I should have said, why didn't I? Next time, I'll... But the next time never comes, because the pattern repeats. And the nighttime rehearsals grow louder. Marcus would say, this is not overthinking. This is your conscience speaking. And it speaks loudest when you finally stop moving. Here's what Marcus did with this. Every evening, he would sit quietly and ask himself 3 questions. First, what did I do today that aligned with my values? Second, what did I do today that violated them? Third, what will I do differently tomorrow? He didn't ask these questions to punish himself. He asked them to clarify himself. Because clarity is not loud, it's simple. And once the mind has clarity, it stops circling. Think about the last time you felt restless at night. What was the thought that kept returning? Was it really about tomorrow's meeting? Or was it about the fact that you haven't been honest about something? Was it really about the mistake you made? Or was it about the fear that you're not living the way you know you should? The Stoics believed that the restless mind is often a moral mind. It's not broken, it's awake, and it's asking you to pay attention. But here's the quieter layer beneath that. Most people don't want to pay attention because paying attention means seeing what needs to change. And change feels hard, so instead, they distract, they scroll, they binge, they numb. And the mind interprets this as danger. It says, if we're avoiding something, it must be important. I need to keep reminding you. And the reminders get louder. Marcus writes, look within. The fountain of good lies within, and it can spring up if you continually dig. Meaning, the answers are already inside you, but you have to be willing to look, and nighttime is when the looking happens, whether you want it to or not. So instead of fighting it, Marcus used it. He turned nighttime into a ritual of honesty, not harsh honesty, compassionate honesty. The kind that says, I see where I fell short today, and tomorrow I'll try again. No drama, no self-hatred, no spiral, just clarity. And with clarity comes rest. Because the mind doesn't need perfection. It needs acknowledgement. It needs to know that you're listening. And once it knows you're listening, it stops shouting. Hold that gently, because it returns later. For now, just notice. If your mind races at night, what is it trying to tell you? Not the surface worry, the deeper truth. And as you listen, you don't have to do anything. Just let the question sit, because once you see this, the next piece becomes inevitable. Chapter 4, Control and Acceptance. The mind wants control, and nighttime is when it realizes it has none. This is the core of Stoic philosophy, and it's the reason Marcus could sleep in a war camp while you struggle to sleep in a quiet room. He understood the difference between what you can control and what you cannot. And he stopped wasting energy on the second category. Most people do the opposite. They spend their nights trying to control tomorrow. They replay the past, trying to rewrite it. They imagine every possible outcome, trying to prevent disaster. But the past is fixed, and the future is unknowable. So what are you actually controlling? Nothing. You're rehearsing, and rehearsal feels like preparation. But it's not. It's resistance. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to you. Your actions, your intentions, your responses. Some things are not. Other people's opinions, tomorrow's events, the outcome of your efforts. And the path to peace is learning to release the second category completely, not with resignation, with acceptance. Because acceptance is not giving up, it's choosing where to put your energy. Let me show you what this looks like. Imagine two people facing the same situation. A job interview tomorrow. The first person spends the night worrying. What if they don't like me? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I fail? They rehearse every possible question. They imagine every scenario. They try to control the outcome. The second person prepares differently. They review their experience. They clarify their intentions. They rest because they know the interview is up to them. But the decision is not. They can control their preparation. They cannot control the result. So they focus on what they can do and release what they cannot. Which person sleeps? The second, which person performs better? Also the second, because rest is a form of trust. And trust is what allows the mind to stop calculating. Marcus writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Meaning, the moment you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you reclaim your energy. And that energy can finally rest. But this is where the pattern reveals itself. Most people don't resist control because they're stubborn. They resist it because letting go feels like giving up. They think, if I stop worrying, I'll stop caring. If I stop planning, I'll be unprepared. If I stop controlling, I'll be helpless. But Marcus would say, you're confusing vigilance with worry. Vigilance is awake. Worry is exhausting. Vigilance prepares. Worry spirals. Vigilance acts. Worry imagines. And nighttime is not the time for vigilance. It's the time for trust. A modern story. You send an important email, you reread it 3 times before hitting send, and then you lie down, and immediately your mind starts reviewing it again. Did I phrase that right? What if they misunderstand? Should I send a follow-up? But here's the truth. The email is sent. You can't unsend it. You can't control how they receive it. The only thing left to do is wait. But waiting feels unbearable. Because waiting means surrendering control. And your mind hates that. So it keeps you awake, trying to solve what cannot be solved. Marcus would say, this is where you practice acceptance. Not because the outcome doesn't matter, but because worrying about it changes nothing. The email is sent. The future is unfolding. Your job is to rest, because tomorrow you'll need your clarity. And clarity doesn't come from exhaustion. It comes from trust. Now notice what happens when we look closer. The things you worry about at night, how many of them actually happen? Not many. And of the ones that do happen, how many were prevented by your worry? None. Because worry is not preparation. It's a rehearsal for suffering that hasn't arrived. Marcus knew this. He writes, "Today I escaped anxiety." Or no, I discarded it because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. Meaning, the anxiety is not in tomorrow. It's in how you're holding tomorrow. And you can put it down, not by pretending tomorrow doesn't matter, but by recognizing that tonight is not the time to solve it. Tonight is the time to rest. So you can meet tomorrow with clarity, just for a moment. Let your shoulders drop, feel the weight of your body where it rests. And as you listen, you don't have to control anything, because control was never the answer. Trust is, and that trust begins with releasing what you cannot change. We'll return to this, but first, we need to look at the thoughts themselves, because it's not enough to know what you can't control. You also need to know how to judge what you can. Chapter 5, Judging Thoughts Clearly. A thought is not a prophecy. It's often just a signal that you care. This is one of the most important distinctions Marcus teaches, because most people treat their thoughts as truth. If they think I'm going to fail, they believe failure is inevitable. If they think something bad will happen, they start bracing for disaster. But Marcus would say, a thought is an impression, not a fact, and impressions can be examined. The Stoics called this cognitive examination. When a thought arrives, you don't have to believe it immediately. You can pause, you can question it, you can test its validity, and most of the time, the thought dissolves, because it was never true. It was just a feeling wearing the costume of certainty. Let me give you a concrete example. It's late, you're lying in bed, and suddenly you think, I said something wrong today, and immediately your mind starts spiraling. They probably think I'm incompetent. I ruined everything. I should have stayed quiet. But Marcus would stop you here. He would say, hold on. Let's examine this. First, what exactly did you say? Second, how did they respond? Third, is there evidence that harm was done, or are you imagining it? And when you answer these questions honestly, you often realize they didn't react negatively. They didn't mention it. There's no evidence of harm. The disaster exists only in your mind. And once you see that, the thought loses its power, because you've separated impression from reality. This is what Marcus practiced every single night. He would review his day, not to punish himself, but to clarify himself, to separate what actually happened from what his mind added to it. And this practice is what allowed him to sleep. Here's the part most people overlook quietly. Your thoughts at night are not random. They follow patterns. And if you pay attention, you start to notice the patterns. Maybe you always catastrophize outcomes. Maybe you always assume people are judging you. Maybe you always replay moments where you felt small. These are not truths. These are habits, and habits can be changed, but only if you see them clearly first. Marcus writes, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Meaning, even your own thoughts are perspectives. They are shaped by your fears, your history, your assumptions, and they can be questioned. A modern everyday example. You're at a social gathering. You say something you think is interesting, and no one responds. Later that night, your mind replays it. That was so awkward. Everyone thought I was boring. I should never speak up. But Marcus would ask, is that what happened? Or is that your interpretation? Maybe they didn't hear you. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe they agreed and didn't feel the need to comment. The silence could mean 100 different things. But your mind chose the interpretation that hurts. Why? Because your mind is trying to protect you. It thinks, if I assume the worst, I'll be prepared. But preparation through suffering is not preparation. It's exhaustion, and it prevents you from seeing clearly. So what's the alternative? Marcus teaches, when a thought arrives, pause. Ask, is this thought helpful? Is it true? Is it kind? If the answer to all three is no, you can let it go. Not by forcing it away, but by recognizing it for what it is, a passing impression, not a command. And here's the small detail that changes it. The mind repeats what the heart hasn't been allowed to finish, meaning if you suppress a thought during the day, it returns at night. If you avoid a feeling, it finds you in the dark. But if you acknowledge it, if you name it, if you give it space, it completes. And once it completes, it stops returning. This is why Marcus didn't fight his thoughts. He examined them, he named them, he let them finish, and then they moved on. Because the mind doesn't want to torment you. It wants to be heard, and once it's heard, it rests. So tonight, if a thought arrives that feels overwhelming, try this. Pause. Name the thought out loud or silently. This is the thought that I failed. Then ask, is this true or is this fear? And notice what happens. Often the thought softens. Because you've stopped believing it automatically, you've started examining it. And examination is the first step toward freedom. Let the next breath be slightly slower, and with that in mind, we can move forward. Because once you can judge your thoughts clearly, you can face the biggest one. The thought that keeps most people awake, fear of tomorrow. Chapter 6, Fear of Tomorrow. What is your mind protecting you from by keeping you awake? This is the question Marcus would ask when worry about tomorrow arrives. Because the Stoics understood something most people miss. Fear of tomorrow is not really about tomorrow. It's about today's unfinished feelings. You're not afraid of the future. You're afraid of how you'll feel when the future arrives. And your mind thinks, if I prepare enough, if I calculate enough, if I imagine enough, I can prevent the feeling, but you can't. Because feelings are not problems to solve. They're experiences to move through. And the more you try to avoid them, the louder they become. Let me show you what this looks like. You have a difficult conversation tomorrow, maybe with your boss, maybe with someone you love. During the day, you push it aside. You stay busy. You tell yourself you'll deal with it later. But at night, it returns. And suddenly, you're rehearsing every possible version of the conversation. You imagine what they'll say. You plan what you'll respond. You calculate how to defend yourself. But here's what's really happening. You're not preparing for the conversation. You're trying to control how you'll feel during it. You're trying to eliminate uncertainty. You're trying to avoid vulnerability. But Marcus would say, you can't script a living moment. All you can do is show up with clarity. And clarity requires rest, not rehearsal. The Stoics believed that fear of the future is rooted in attachment to outcome. You fear tomorrow because you want it to go a certain way. And the more you need it to go that way, the more you suffer when it doesn't. But what if you release the need for it to go a certain way? What if you prepared and then trusted? A thought Marcus returns to again and again. Confine yourself to the present, not because the future doesn't matter, but because the present is the only place where you have power. In this moment, right now, you are okay. You are breathing. You are safe. You are here. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet. And when it does happen, you'll meet it with the resources you have. But you can't meet it with clarity if you spent the night rehearsing suffering. Here's a modern story that captures this. Someone is waiting for medical test results. They won't arrive for 3 days. During the day, they distract themselves. They work, they scroll, they stay busy. But at night, the waiting becomes unbearable. Their mind starts imagining worst-case scenarios. What if it's bad news? What if I can't handle it? What if everything changes? And they lie awake, suffering in advance. But Marcus would say, right now, in this moment, do you have the results? No. So right now, in this moment, are you sick? You don't know, meaning you're suffering for something that may never happen. And even if it does happen, suffering now doesn't prepare you. It exhausts you. So the Stoic practice is this. Bring your mind back to now, not because tomorrow doesn't matter, but because now is the only moment you can actually live in. Tomorrow, when it arrives, will also be now, and you'll face it then with presence, with clarity, with whatever strength you have. But tonight is for rest. This is where the story turns quietly, because fear of tomorrow is not just about events, it's about identity. You're not just afraid of what might happen, you're afraid of who you'll become if it happens. What if I fail and everyone sees me as a failure? What if I lose and I'm not strong enough to recover? What if things change and I can't adapt? These are the deeper fears, and they're the ones that keep you awake, because they're not about tomorrow's events. They're about today's worth. Marcus understood this. He writes, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength, meaning your worth is not determined by outcomes, it's determined by how you show up. And you can show up with dignity, regardless of what happens. But here's the quieter layer beneath that. Most people don't believe this. They think, my worth is proven by success. My value is measured by results. My identity is built on achievement. And so, when tomorrow feels uncertain, their entire sense of self feels threatened. This is why they can't sleep. Because they're not just protecting tomorrow, they're protecting their identity. But Marcus would say, your identity is not your achievements. Your identity is your character. And character is built in how you face uncertainty, not in avoiding it. So, fear of tomorrow is an invitation, not to rehearse, not to control, but to trust that you are enough, regardless of outcome. Notice the air moving in and out. Feel the weight of your body where it rests. And just for now, let tomorrow be tomorrow, because it will arrive whether you worry or not. And you'll meet it better if you've rested. So the next chapter isn't about fixing fear, it's about understanding why it doesn't last. Because even your deepest worries are impermanent. Chapter 7. Impermanence of worry. The things you worried about last year, where are they now? Gone. Some of them happened, some didn't. But either way, they passed, and you're still here. This is what Marcus meditated on every single night. The impermanence of everything. Not to make life feel meaningless, but to remind himself, this moment of suffering will also pass. The Stoics called this practice memento mori, remember you will die. But it wasn't morbid, it was liberating. Because when you remember that life is finite, you stop wasting it on imaginary suffering. You stop rehearsing catastrophes that may never come. You stop clinging to outcomes you can't control. And you start living in the only moment you have, now. Most people resist impermanence. They want things to last. They want certainty. They want guarantees. But Marcus would say, impermanence is not the problem. Resistance to it is, because everything changes. Your worries, your fears, your circumstances, even the thoughts keeping you awake tonight will be gone by tomorrow. So why give them so much power? Let me show you what this looks like in practice. You're lying awake, thinking about a mistake you made. Your mind is looping. I ruined everything. But Marcus would ask, will this matter in a month? In a year? In 10 years? And when you answer honestly, you realize it won't. Not because it doesn't matter now, but because time softens everything. The urgency you feel tonight will fade. The embarrassment will lessen. the fear will dissolve because everything is impermanent, including this moment of suffering. Here's a story from Marcus's own life. He was Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world, and yet he wrote, "Soon you will have forgotten everything. Soon everybody will have forgotten you." He wasn't being nihilistic. He was being honest. Even his empire would fade. Even his legacy would become dust. So what was worth holding on to? Not power, not reputation, not control. Only this: living with integrity in the present moment. Because the present moment is the only thing that's real. The past is memory. The future is imagination. But now is where life actually happens. And when you remember this, your worries lose their grip. Because you realize they're not happening now. They're happening in your imagination of later. And later is not real yet. A modern example. You're worried about a presentation next week. Your mind keeps rehearsing it, imagining what could go wrong, calculating how to avoid disaster. But Marcus would say, next week is not here. Right now, in this moment, are you presenting? No. So right now, in this moment, is there a problem? No, meaning the problem exists only in the future you're imagining. And that future is not real yet. So why suffer for it now? Why exhaust yourself over something that hasn't happened? The Stoic answer: you don't have to. You can bring your mind back to now, and now is manageable. Now is just this breath. Now is just this moment of rest. Tomorrow will come, and when it does, you'll face it. But tonight is not tomorrow. Tonight is tonight, and tonight you can rest. But here's the small detail that changes it. Impermanence is not just about big things. It's about small things too. The irritation you feel passes. The sadness you carry softens. The worry you're holding dissolves. If you let it, most people don't let it. They cling to their worries. They rehearse them. They feed them, because letting go feels dangerous. It feels like giving up. But Marcus would say, letting go is not giving up. It's releasing what you can't carry, so you can move forward. Marcus writes, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Meaning, life is short, moments are fleeting, so don't waste them on imaginary suffering. Live them fully, presently, gratefully. And when worry arrives, remind yourself, this too will pass. Just as every other worry has passed, just as every other fear has faded, this one will too. Not because you forced it, but because everything is impermanent Including suffering, let your shoulders drop. Notice the air moving in and out. And with that in mind, we can move forward. Because if everything is impermanent, then peace is always available. Not out there, but in here, in the inner citadel, the place Marcus built that nothing external could touch. Chapter 8, the inner citadel. There is a place inside you that cannot be disturbed. Marcus called it the inner citadel, a fortress, a sanctuary, a place of perfect calm, not physical, not visible, but real and accessible in any moment, even in chaos, even in noise, even in war, because the citadel is not built from walls, it's built from perspective. The Stoics believed that external events cannot harm you, only your judgments about them can, meaning the storm outside is just weather. It becomes suffering only when you resist it. The criticism you receive is just words. It becomes pain only when you believe it defines you. The uncertainty you face is just life. It becomes anxiety only when you demand certainty. So, the inner citadel is the practice of choosing your responses, not reacting to everything, not letting every event disturb your peace, but responding from a place of steadiness. Let me show you what this looks like. Imagine two people stuck in traffic. The first person is furious. They honk, they curse, they spiral into frustration. The second person notices the traffic and accepts it. They can't control it. They can't change it. So they don't resist it. They breathe. They listen to music. They stay present. Both are in the same traffic, but only one is suffering. Why? Because the first person has left their citadel. They've allowed an external event to disturb their inner peace. The second person has stayed inside. They've maintained their calm, regardless of conditions. This is the power of the inner citadel. It doesn't prevent storms. It allows you to remain steady while storms pass. Marcus writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This is not about denial. It's about sovereignty. You are sovereign over your inner world, and no one can take that from you. Not your circumstances, not other people, not even your own fears, unless you give them permission. A story from Marcus's life. He was emperor during one of Rome's darkest periods. War, plague, betrayal, loss. Everything external was chaos, and yet, in his private writings, he returns again and again to this. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. He wasn't pretending the chaos didn't exist. He was choosing not to let it colonize his mind. He was protecting his citadel. And that protection is what allowed him to lead, to make decisions, to stay clear. because clarity doesn't come from control. It comes from steadiness. And steadiness comes from knowing there is a place inside me that nothing can touch unless I let it. This is where the pattern reveals itself. Most people spend their lives trying to fix the outside. They think, if I control my environment, I'll feel safe. If I control other people, I'll feel secure. If I control outcomes, I'll feel calm. But Marcus would say, you're building walls in the wrong place, because no matter how much you control externally, you'll never feel safe, because safety is not out there. It's in here, in your ability to remain steady, regardless of conditions. A modern story. Someone is constantly checking the news, constantly refreshing their feed, constantly monitoring what's happening in the world. They think, if I stay informed, I'll be prepared. But they're not prepared. They're overwhelmed because they've let the noise invade their citadel. They've given external chaos permission to disturb their peace. And now they can't rest, because rest requires boundaries, not physical boundaries, mental ones. The ability to say, this is happening in the world, but it does not have to colonize my mind. I can be aware without being consumed. I can care without being controlled. This is the practice of the inner citadel, and it's available to you right now. Because the citadel is not something you build over years. It's something you return to in each moment. When worry arrives, you notice, I'm outside the citadel, and you step back in. When fear arrives, you notice, I'm letting the external disturb the internal, and you reclaim your sovereignty. When noise arrives, you notice, I'm reacting instead of responding, and you pause. Marcus practiced this every single day, not perfectly, but consistently. And over time, the citadel became stronger, not because the storm stopped, but because he learned to weather them from a place of inner calm, and that calm is what allowed him to sleep, even in chaos, even in uncertainty, even in war, because he knew there is a place inside me that is always safe. Not because nothing can touch it, but because I choose what touches it. Just for a moment, let your shoulders drop. Feel the weight of your body where it rests, and notice, right now, in this moment, you are safe. The worries are in your mind, but you are here, in the citadel, and that is where peace lives. So the next chapter isn't about escaping, it's about learning to be alone without running. Because solitude is not the problem, resistance to it is. Chapter 9, Solitude without escape. You are never more yourself than when you are alone, and you are never more afraid than when you're alone with your thoughts. This is the paradox Marcus understood. Solitude reveals truth, But most people run from it. They fill the silence with noise. They stay busy. They distract, because being alone means facing what you've been avoiding, and that feels unbearable. But Marcus would say, solitude is not the enemy. Avoidance is. The Stoics believed that the ability to be alone is the foundation of inner peace. Not because you should isolate, but because if you can't be at peace alone, you can't be at peace anywhere. Because wherever you go, you take yourself with you. And if yourself is unbearable, no amount of distraction will fix that. Only facing it will. A concrete, modern example. You finish work, the house is quiet, no one is home, and immediately you reach for your phone. You scroll, you check messages, you watch videos, not because you're interested, but because the silence feels uncomfortable. You think, if I stop, I'll feel something I don't want to feel. So you don't stop. But Marcus would ask, what are you afraid of? What feeling are you avoiding? And when you answer honestly, you realize you're not afraid of being alone. You're afraid of what you'll notice when you stop distracting yourself. Maybe you'll notice you're lonely. Maybe you'll notice you're unhappy. Maybe you'll notice you've been running from yourself for a long time. And that realization feels like failure. But it's not failure, it's clarity. And clarity is the first step toward change. Marcus writes, nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. But most people don't experience their soul as quiet. They experience it as loud, judgmental, restless, demanding, because they've never learned to be with themselves without judgment. They've learned to perform, to produce, to prove, but they haven't learned to simply be. And nighttime is when the performance ends, when the doing stops, and the being becomes visible. This is why so many people struggle at night, not because night is dangerous, but because night requires solitude, and solitude requires presence. And presence reveals everything you've been avoiding. Here's the small detail that changes it. Solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is the feeling that something is missing. Solitude is the practice of being complete without anything added. And most people confuse the two. They think, if I'm alone, I'm lonely. But Marcus would say, if you're lonely when you're alone, you're in bad company. Meaning, the problem is not the solitude. The problem is how you treat yourself when you're alone. Do you criticize? Do you judge? Do you rehearse your failures? Or do you listen? Do you accept? Do you offer yourself the same compassion you'd offer a friend? Because if you can't be kind to yourself, solitude will always feel like punishment. But if you learn to be kind, solitude becomes refuge. a place where you don't have to perform, where you don't have to prove, where you can simply rest. This is what Marcus practiced. Not escaping himself, but befriending himself. And that practice is what allowed him to sleep, because he didn't fear being alone with his thoughts. He had learned to guide them, to hold them gently, to question them without judgment, and that ability is what creates peace. Not the absence of thoughts, but the presence of kindness toward yourself. Let the next breath be slightly slower. Notice the air moving in and out. And as you listen, you don't have to do anything. Just be here with yourself, without judgment, because solitude is not the problem. Fear of what you'll find there is, and once you stop fearing it, you realize what you've been running from is not as scary as you thought. It's just you, and you are worthy of your own kindness. So the next chapter isn't about adding more, it's about releasing the noise, because peace doesn't arrive when you fill the silence. It arrives when you stop needing to. Chapter 10. Detaching from noise. The world is loud, but your mind is louder. Marcus knew this. He ruled an empire. He heard 1,000 voices every day. Advisors, generals, citizens, critics, and yet, he writes, it is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments about them. Meaning, the noise is not the problem. Your relationship to the noise is, because you can't silence the world, but you can choose what you let in. The Stoics called this selective attention, the practice of deciding what deserves your focus and what doesn't. Not everything that arrives at your door needs to enter. Not every opinion needs to be considered. Not every worry needs to be entertained. Some things you can simply let pass. Like clouds, you notice them. You don't chase them. A modern everyday story. You're scrolling before bed. You see a headline that disturbs you. You click, you read, you spiral, and suddenly you're lying awake, thinking about something that's completely outside your control. But Marcus would ask, why did you let that in? Did it serve you? Did it help you? Did it make you wiser? No, it made you anxious. So why give it space in your mind? This is not about denial. It's about discernment. Some information is useful, some is not. Some thoughts are helpful, some are not. And you have the power to decide which ones you let into your citadel. But here's where most people struggle. They think, I have to pay attention to everything. If I don't, I'll miss something important. But Marcus would say, you can't pay attention to everything. Your attention is finite. And if you spend it on noise, you'll have none left for signal. So the Stoic practice is this. Guard your attention like you guard your home. Not everything gets in, only what's worthy. And what's worthy? What aligns with your values? What serves your peace? What helps you grow? Everything else is noise. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. You're at a gathering. Someone makes a comment that bothers you. Your first instinct is to engage, to defend, to correct. But Marcus would say, pause. Does this deserve your energy? Is this person open to listening? Is this conversation going to change anything? Or is it just noise? And when you answer honestly, you realize it's noise, so you let it pass. Not because you're weak, because you're wise. You've chosen where to spend your energy. And this is not it. A thought Marcus returns to again and again. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, meaning don't get pulled into endless debates. Don't exhaust yourself defending your position. Just live it and let the noise be noise. Because the noise will always be there. People will always have opinions. The world will always have problems. Your mind will always generate thoughts. But you don't have to attend to all of it. You can choose what you let in. And what you let pass. This is the practice of detachment, not disconnection, discernment. Here's the quieter layer beneath that. Most people are afraid to detach. They think, if I stop paying attention, I'll lose control. If I stop engaging, I'll be uninformed. If I stop caring, I'll be indifferent. But Marcus would say, detachment is not indifference. It's sovereignty. It's the ability to care without being consumed, to be aware without being overwhelmed, to stay informed without being colonized. Because you can hold the world lightly. You don't have to carry it. A modern story that captures this. Someone checks the news constantly. Every alert, every update, they think, I'm staying informed. But they're not informed, they're exhausted. Because information without discernment is noise. And noise without boundaries is chaos. So the Stoic practice is this. Decide what you need to know, then stop. Everything else is distraction. And distraction is the enemy of peace. Because peace requires space, mental space, emotional space, the ability to say, this is happening, but it doesn't have to live in my mind. I can acknowledge it and move on. Just for a moment, let your shoulders drop. Notice the air moving in and out, and with that in mind, we can move forward. Because detaching from noise is not enough. You also have to release desire, because desire is often the loudest noise of all. Chapter 11. Desire as disturbance. Your mind races at night because it wants something. Relief, certainty, closure, control, and it thinks, If I plan enough, if I calculate enough, if I imagine enough, I'll get what I want. But Marcus would say, desire is not the problem. Attachment to desire is. The Stoics didn't teach you to eliminate wanting. They taught you to hold wanting lightly, to prefer outcomes, but not need them, to hope for things, but not depend on them. Because the moment you need something external, you've given away your peace. And peace is not something you can buy back. Let me show you what this looks like. You want a promotion. You've worked hard. You deserve it. But the decision is not yours. So, at night, your mind starts calculating, what if I don't get it? What if someone else does? What will that mean about me? And suddenly, your entire sense of worth is tied to something you can't control. This is attachment. And attachment is suffering, not because wanting is wrong, but because needing makes you vulnerable, Marcus writes. He who lives in harmony with himself lives in harmony with the universe. Meaning, peace comes from internal alignment, not external achievement. And the moment you need external validation, you've lost alignment. Because now your peace depends on something outside yourself, and that is fragile. A modern, everyday example. You send a text. You wait for a response. Minutes pass, then hours, and your mind starts spinning. Why haven't they replied? Are they upset with me? Did I say something wrong? But Marcus would ask, why does this disturb you? Because you want a reply, or because you need one? There's a difference. Wanting is light. You prefer it, but you're okay without it. Needing is heavy. You're attached, and without it, you suffer. So the Stoic practice is this: want, but don't need. Hope, but don't demand. Prefer, but don't cling. Because life will not always give you what you want, but it will always give you what you need to grow. And growth requires releasing attachment. Here's the part most people overlook quietly. Desire is often disguised as need. You think, I need this job to be happy, but what you really need is purpose. And purpose doesn't come from a job title. It comes from how you show up. You think, I need this relationship to feel whole, but what you really need is connection. And connection doesn't come from another person completing you. It comes from you being complete already. You think, I need this outcome to feel secure. But what you really need is trust. And trust doesn't come from certainty. It comes from accepting uncertainty. So what you're chasing is often a substitute for something deeper. And the substitute never satisfies. A story from Marcus's own life. He was Emperor of Rome. He had everything anyone could want: power, wealth, influence, legacy. And yet, he writes, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. He's not saying material things don't matter. He's saying they don't create peace. Only alignment does. And alignment comes from releasing the belief that external things will fix internal emptiness. Because they won't. They'll distract. They'll comfort. They'll provide temporary relief. But they won't fill the void. Only presence does that. Only accepting what is. Only releasing the need for what isn't. This is why Marcus could sleep. Not because he had everything, but because he needed nothing. He wanted things. He preferred things. He worked toward things. But he didn't cling to them. And when they didn't arrive, he didn't collapse. He adapted. He accepted. He moved forward. This is the freedom of non-attachment, not apathy. But sovereignty, let the next breath be slightly slower. Feel the weight of your body where it rests. And as you listen, you don't have to cling to anything. Because peace is not something you chase. It's something you allow. By releasing the need for it to arrive on your terms. So the next chapter isn't about doing more. It's about being present, right here, right now. Because the present moment is the only place peace actually exists. Chapter 12, Practicing Present Awareness. Peace is not in tomorrow, is not in yesterday. It's here, right now, in this breath, in this moment, in this body resting. Marcus knew this. He writes, confine yourself to the present, not as a restriction, as a practice, because the present moment is the only place where life actually happens. And it's the only place where peace exists. But most people don't live in the present. They live in memory. They live in anticipation. They live in rehearsal. And the present passes unnoticed until night, when the distractions fade and the present becomes unavoidable. And that's when they realize, I don't know how to be here without doing, without planning, without escaping, just here. This is what Marcus practiced every single day. Not once, not occasionally, constantly. He called it present awareness, the practice of returning again and again to now. Not because the past and future don't matter, but because they're not real. The past is memory. The future is imagination. But now is where you are. And when you learn to be here fully, suffering decreases. Because suffering lives in the gap between what is and what you wish was. And when you close that gap by accepting what is, peace arrives. Let me show you what this looks like. You're lying in bed. Your mind is replaying a conversation from earlier. I should have said, why didn't I? But Marcus would stop you. He would say, that conversation is over. It's in the past. You can learn from it, but you can't change it. So let it go and return to now. Now you are lying down. Now you are breathing. Now you are safe. That's all that's real. The replay is imagination, and imagination of the past is not useful. It's rumination, and rumination keeps you awake. A concrete modern example. You're worried about a conversation tomorrow. Your mind starts rehearsing it. I'll say this, they'll say that. But Marcus would say, that conversation hasn't happened yet. You're rehearsing a future that doesn't exist. And you're suffering for something imaginary. So return to now. Now, the conversation isn't happening. Now, there is no problem. Now, you can rest. And when tomorrow comes, you'll meet it then. With presence, with clarity, with the energy you saved by not rehearsing suffering. This is the power of present awareness. It doesn't deny the future. It just refuses to live there. Because you can't live in the future. You can only live now. And now is manageable. Now is just this breath. Now is just this moment. And this moment is okay. Marcus practiced this by asking himself one question repeatedly. Where am I right now? Not physically, mentally. Am I here or am I in my head? Am I present or am I rehearsing? Am I living or am I imagining? And when he noticed he was in his head, he returned to now. Not harshly, gently. The way you'd guide a child back to the path. Come back. You're safe here. And over time, the returns became faster. He didn't eliminate wandering. He just noticed it sooner and returned sooner. And that practice is what creates peace. Not perfection, not elimination. Just gentle, consistent return. Here's the small detail that changes it. Most people think, I can't stay present. My mind wanders too much. But Marcus would say, the mind always wanders. That's its nature. The practice is not stopping the wandering. It's noticing when you've wandered and returning again and again and again, without judgment, without frustration, just return. And each return strengthens presence until eventually presence becomes your baseline. Not because you've mastered your mind, but because you've learned to guide it with patience, with kindness, with practice. Notice the air moving in and out. Let your shoulders drop, and right now, in this moment, just be here. Not thinking about what comes next, not analyzing what came before, just here, in this breath, in this body, in this safe, quiet moment, because this is where peace lives. Not later, not eventually, now. And that leads to the question beneath the question, how do you prepare for rest? Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Because rest is not something that happens to you, it's something you allow by preparing your soul for sleep. Chapter 13. Preparing the soul for rest. Rest is not an accident. It's a practice. Marcus knew this. Every evening, he had a ritual, not elaborate, not time-consuming, just intentional. He would sit quietly. He would review his day. He would release what he couldn't control. And then he would sleep. Not because sleep came easily, but because he'd prepared his mind to receive it. The Stoics believed that the mind needs closure, not in the sense of fixing everything, but in the sense of acknowledging today is complete and tomorrow is not here yet. So for now, I can rest. Most people don't give themselves this closure. They go from activity directly to bed, and they wonder why their mind can't settle. But the mind needs transition. It needs permission to stop working. And that permission comes from ritual. Let me show you what this looks like. Imagine finishing work. You close your laptop, you turn off the lights, but your mind is still running. It's still calculating, still planning, still rehearsing, because you didn't give it closure. You didn't tell it. The day is over. We're done. So it keeps working, trying to solve, trying to prepare, trying to control. But Marcus would say, the mind is not a machine you turn off. It's a companion you guide, and it needs a signal. We're transitioning now from doing to being. So the Stoic evening practice had 3 parts. First, reflection. What did I do today that aligned with my values? What didn't? Not to judge, just to notice. Second, release. What am I carrying that I can't control? Let it go. Not forever, just for tonight. Third, gratitude. What am I grateful for today? Even one small thing. Because gratitude shifts the mind from scarcity to sufficiency. And sufficiency allows rest. A modern story that captures this. Someone ends their day by scrolling. They see news. They see conflict. They see comparison. And then they try to sleep. But their mind is full of noise because they filled it with noise right before bed. They didn't prepare their soul for rest. They prepared it for vigilance. So, of course, they can't sleep. Their mind thinks, there's still danger, there's still work, there's still something to monitor. But Marcus would say, you have to signal safety, not by denying reality, but by choosing what you expose yourself to before rest. Because rest requires softness, and softness requires space from noise, from urgency, from vigilance. Here's the part most people overlook quietly. The last thing you think before sleep shapes your night. If the last thing is worry, you'll dream worry. If the last thing is gratitude, you'll rest in peace. Not because gratitude solves problems, but because it shifts focus from what's missing to what's here. And what's here is often enough. So Marcus's final practice before sleep was this: name 3 things. 1 thing I'm grateful for. 1 thing I did well today. 1 thing I'll release until tomorrow. Not elaborate, not performative, just honest. And that honesty prepared his soul for rest. Let me give you a concrete practice you can use tonight. Before you close your eyes, pause. Take 3 slow breaths. Then ask yourself, what went well today? Even 1 small thing. What am I carrying that I can release tonight? What can wait until tomorrow? And then name 1 thing you're grateful for. Not something big, something simple. A warm bed, a quiet room, a breath that comes easily. Because gratitude for small things trains the mind to notice sufficiency. And sufficiency is the opposite of scarcity. And scarcity is what keeps you awake. So when you notice sufficiency, rest arrives. Not because life is perfect, but because you've acknowledged, for this moment, I have enough. Marcus writes, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive. But he also knew, when you lie down at night, think of what a precious privilege it is to rest, to let go, to release, to trust that tomorrow will come and you'll meet it with the clarity that rest provides. Just for a moment, let your shoulders drop. Notice the weight of your body where it rests. And as you listen, you don't have to prepare anything else. You've done enough. Today is complete, and tonight is for rest. So the next chapter isn't about adding more to your life. It's about removing what's unnecessary, because peace doesn't come from accumulation. It comes from simplicity. Chapter 14, voluntary simplicity. The more you own, the more you carry. Not just things, commitments, expectations, identities. And at night, when the noise fades, you feel the weight. Marcus understood this. He was emperor. He had everything. And yet, he practiced voluntary simplicity. Not poverty, not deprivation, but release, the art of letting go of what doesn't serve. Because peace is not found in accumulation, it's found in subtraction. The Stoics believed that most of what we chase, we don't actually need. We need food, shelter, connection, purpose. But we don't need the house that impresses others. We don't need the title that validates us. We don't need the identity that others expect. And when we release what we don't need, space opens. Mental space, emotional space, the ability to breathe. Let me show you what this looks like. You're lying awake, thinking about all the things you have to do, the commitments, the obligations, the expectations, and you think, I can't say no. People are counting on me. But Marcus would ask, are these things truly necessary? Or are they things you've agreed to because you couldn't say no? Because simplicity is not about doing less. It's about doing what matters and releasing what doesn't, a modern, everyday story. Someone has a calendar full of meetings, commitments, events. They think, I'm important. People need me. But they're exhausted because they've confused busyness with purpose. And busyness is not purpose. Busyness is distraction from the work that actually matters, from the life that's passing by, from the rest that's desperately needed. So the Stoic practice is this. Audit your life. What are you doing because you want to? What are you doing because you think you should? And what would happen if you stopped? Often, nothing. The world continues. People adapt. Life goes on. Because most of what we think is necessary isn't. It's just familiar. And familiar feels safer than change. But Marcus would say, familiar exhaustion is still exhaustion. And if you're too tired to live fully, what's the point? So simplify. Not all at once, not dramatically. Just one thing, one commitment you release, one expectation you let go, one identity you stop performing, and notice what happens. Space opens, energy returns, clarity arrives. Because you've removed what was blocking it, here's the quieter layer beneath that. Most people resist simplicity because they fear irrelevance. They think, if I do less, I'll matter less. If I release commitments, people will forget me. If I stop performing, I'll disappear. But Marcus would say, you matter because of who you are, not because of what you do. And when you release what doesn't serve, you become more yourself, not less. A story from Marcus's own life. He had the power to own anything, to command anyone, to accumulate endlessly. But he writes, very little is needed to make a happy life. He's not preaching poverty, he's stating truth. Happiness doesn't come from more, it comes from enough, and enough is often less than you think. So what would it look like to live with enough? Not depriving yourself, but releasing the excess, the commitments that drain you, the possessions you don't use, the identities you're too tired to perform, and returning to simplicity, not as punishment, as freedom, because freedom is not having everything. It's needing nothing, and needing nothing allows you to rest, because there's nothing left to chase, nothing left to prove, nothing left to carry. Just life, simple, present, enough, Let the next breath be slightly slower. Feel the weight of your body where it rests. And as you listen, notice. What are you carrying that you could release, not forever, just for tonight? Because tonight, you don't need to carry anything. Tonight is for rest, and rest requires simplicity. So the next chapter isn't about life, it's about death. Because understanding death is what teaches you how to live and how to sleep. Chapter 15, Death as Calming Truth. You are going to die. Marcus meditated on this every single day. Not to be morbid, to be present. Because when you remember that life is finite, you stop wasting it. You stop worrying about things that don't matter. You stop rehearsing problems that may never come. You stop performing for people who won't remember you, and you start living in the only moment that's real. Now, the Stoics called this memento mori, remember you will die. And it was not a threat, it was a gift. Because death clarifies life. It shows you what actually matters. And what you've been wasting time on, most people avoid thinking about death. They think it's too heavy, too dark, too final. But Marcus would say, avoiding death doesn't protect you. It just makes you live smaller. Because when you pretend you have infinite time, you waste time. You put off what matters. You tolerate what drains you. You rehearse suffering that doesn't exist. But when you remember, I have limited time, everything sharpens. You become intentional. You become present. You become grateful because you realize this moment is all I have. And I'm spending it lying awake, worrying about tomorrow. Is that how I want to use this life? A modern story that captures this. Someone receives news that shakes them, a diagnosis, a loss, a reminder of fragility, and suddenly everything changes. The things they worried about don't matter anymore. The grudges they held dissolve. The future they were trying to control becomes irrelevant, because now is all they have, and now demands presence. This is what death teaches, not to live in fear, but to live fully while you can. Marcus writes, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think, not as a threat, as a reminder. You don't know how much time you have, so use it well. Don't waste it on imaginary suffering. Don't spend it rehearsing catastrophes. Don't exhaust yourself chasing things that won't matter when you're gone. Instead, live simply, love deeply, rest fully, because rest is not laziness. Rest is wisdom returning to the body. And when you remember you're going to die, rest becomes sacred. Because every moment of rest is a moment you're not suffering. And every moment you're not suffering is a gift. Here's the small detail that changes it. Death is not the opposite of life. It's the boundary that makes life precious. Without death, nothing would matter. Time would stretch infinitely. Choices would lose weight. Moments would blur. But with death, everything matters. Every conversation, every choice, every breath, because it's finite, and finite is what creates value. So when Marcus meditated on death, he wasn't being morbid, he was being grateful for the fact that he's still here, still breathing, still choosing, still alive. And that gratitude allowed him to sleep because he knew, I lived today as fully as I could, and tomorrow, if it comes, I'll do the same. But tonight, I can rest, knowing that I didn't waste today, and I won't waste tomorrow by lying awake, rehearsing suffering, a practice Marcus used every night. He would imagine, what if tonight was my last night? Would I be satisfied with how I lived today? Would I regret lying awake, worrying? Or would I choose to rest peacefully, knowing I did my best? And when he answered honestly, he realized, I would choose rest, because rest honors life. It doesn't diminish it. So he rested, not because everything was perfect, but because he'd lived intentionally, and that was enough. You can do the same. Right now, imagine, what if tonight was your last night? Would you spend it worrying about tomorrow, or would you rest peacefully, knowing you did your best? The choice is yours. And when you choose rest, you're not giving up. You're honoring life by not wasting it on suffering. Let your shoulders drop. Notice the air moving in and out. And as you listen, remember, you are alive. Right now, in this moment. And that is a gift. Not guaranteed, not infinite, but here, so use it well. And tonight, rest. Because tomorrow will ask for your presence, and you'll give it better if you've rested tonight. So the next chapter isn't about death, it's about gratitude, the practice that transforms suffering into peace. Chapter 16. Gratitude before sleep. The last thought before sleep shapes your night. Marcus knew this, and his last thought was always gratitude. Not because life was perfect, but because gratitude is a choice to notice what's here instead of what's missing, a choice to acknowledge sufficiency instead of rehearsing scarcity, a choice to rest in peace instead of spiraling in worry. The Stoics believe that gratitude is the foundation of peace, not because it solves problems, but because it shifts perspective from what you lack to what you have. And when you notice what you have, Suffering decreases because suffering lives in the gap between reality and expectation. And gratitude closes that gap by accepting reality as it is. Let me show you what this looks like. You're lying in bed. Your mind starts listing problems. I didn't finish that project. They didn't respond to my message. I'm worried about tomorrow. But Marcus would stop you. He would say, yes, those things are true. But what else is true? You have a bed. You have shelter. You have breath. You're safe. You're alive. You're here. Is that not also true? And when you acknowledge both, you realize the problems are real, but so is the sufficiency. And tonight, you can rest in sufficiency, knowing that tomorrow you'll face the problems. But tonight, you don't have to. A concrete modern example: someone ends their day feeling like they failed. They didn't accomplish everything. They made mistakes. They fell short. And as they lie down, their mind starts rehearsing failures. But Marcus would ask, what did you do well today? Even one thing. And when they answer honestly, they realize they showed up, they tried, they cared. Is that not enough? Not because standards don't matter, but because perfection is not the goal. Presence is, and you were present. You did your best, and that is worth acknowledging. Here's the part most people overlook quietly. Gratitude is not about denying problems. It's about noticing that life is more than problems. There are also gifts, small ones, quiet ones, easy to miss ones. But they're there, and when you notice them, perspective shifts from nothing is enough to this is sufficient, and sufficiency allows rest, because the mind doesn't need everything to be perfect. It needs acknowledgement that something is good. Marcus practiced this every night. He would name 3 things. One thing he was grateful for about the day, one person who helped him, one small moment of beauty or peace, not elaborate, not performative, just honest. And that honesty prepared his mind for rest, because gratitude signals safety. It tells the mind, we have enough. We can stop striving. We can rest. And the mind listens. A story from Marcus's own life. He was emperor during plague, during war, during betrayal. He had every reason to despair. And yet, he writes, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He's not denying the chaos. He's choosing to notice the gift, the fact that he's still here, still breathing, still capable, still alive. And that noticing gave him strength, not to fix everything, but to meet the day with presence and to end it with peace. So What would it look like for you to practice this tonight? Not as a task, as a gift to yourself. Before you close your eyes, pause. Take 3 slow breaths and ask, what am I grateful for today? Not something big, something small, a kind word, a quiet moment, a problem that didn't arrive. And just notice it. You don't have to feel overwhelming gratitude. You just have to acknowledge this was good. And that acknowledgement is enough, because it shifts focus from what's wrong to what's right. And when you end the day noticing what's right, you sleep differently. Not because problems disappeared, but because you've remembered life is more than problems. There is also goodness, and goodness is worth resting in. Let the next breath be slightly slower. Feel the weight of your body where it rests, and as you listen, notice, what is one thing you're grateful for right now? Even in this moment, the quiet, the stillness, the safety. Just one thing, and hold it gently, because that is where peace begins. Not in solving everything, but in acknowledging that something is good, and tonight, that is enough. So the final chapter isn't about more practices. It's about trusting that you can sleep with a tranquil mind. Chapter 17. Sleeping with a tranquil mind. You've been carrying a question all night. How do I stop my mind from racing? And Marcus's answer is this: you don't. You guide it. You don't force the mind to stop. You teach it where to rest, not in tomorrow's worries, not in yesterday's regrets, but here, in this moment, in this breath, in this body, because peace is not the absence of thoughts. It's the presence of wisdom, the wisdom to know I can release what I cannot control, the wisdom to recognize a thought is not a prophecy, the wisdom to choose. I will rest because tomorrow asks for my clarity, and clarity, it comes from rest. Everything we've walked through tonight has led to this moment. You understand why your mind races. You've learned what it's trying to protect. You've practiced releasing control, examining thoughts, accepting impermanence. You've built your inner citadel. You've prepared your soul for rest. And now you can sleep, not because everything is solved, but because you've done enough. Today is complete. Tonight is for rest. And tomorrow will meet you with whatever it brings. And you'll face it with the clarity that comes from having rested. Marcus writes, don't let your reflection on the whole sweep of life crush you, meaning, don't lie awake trying to solve your entire life. Just meet this moment, and this moment is manageable. This moment is just breath, and breath is always enough. Let me leave you with one final image. Imagine a still room, late at night, a single lamp burning low. Marcus sits alone, writing his final reflection of the day. He reviews what went well, what didn't, what he'll carry forward, what he'll release, and then he closes the journal. He extinguishes the lamp, and he lies down, not because his empire is at peace, but because his mind is. He's done what he can. The rest is not his to control. So he rests fully, deeply, peacefully, knowing that tomorrow will come and he'll meet it, as he always has, with presence, with clarity, with tranquility. This is the gift of Stoic philosophy. Not a life without problems, but a mind that can rest despite them. And that rest is what allows you to live fully, because you're not exhausted by imaginary suffering. You're present to actual life, and life is here. In this breath, in this moment, in this quiet, safe space, where nothing is demanded of you, where you can finally let go. So, as we close, I want to offer you a gentle practice. Not something you have to do, just something you can allow. Let your shoulders drop completely. Feel the weight of your body sinking into where it rests. Notice the air moving in and out, slow, natural, easy. And with each exhale, release one thing you've been holding. You don't have to name it, just let it go. With the next breath, release something else, a worry, a rehearsal, a need for certainty. Just let it go. And with each release, notice, space opens, softness arrives, and beneath all the noise, there's stillness. That stillness is your citadel. It's always been there, waiting for you to return. And now you have, so rest here, in this moment, in this breath, in this tranquil mind. You've done enough, you are enough. And tonight you can sleep, knowing that Marcus's wisdom is now yours, not as knowledge, but as practice, and practice becomes peace. When you return to it, again and again, with patience, with kindness, with trust. So let the day complete, let the night embrace you, and let your mind finally rest, because you've earned it, not by solving everything, but by releasing what you cannot solve and trusting that tomorrow will come and you'll meet it, as Marcus did, with a tranquil mind. Sleep well.